Long before the Kennedy name carried the weight of power, promise, and tragedy, the quiet shores of Hyannis Port were just another corner of Cape Cod, windswept, unpolished, and known mostly to local fishermen who understood the rhythm of the Atlantic better than anyone else. The land that would one day become the center of America's most legendary political dynasty began as nothing more than a modest summer retreat, touched by salt air and shaped by the endless tides. But in the 1920s, a young and ambitious Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. was searching for more than success. He wanted a place that could hold a family legacy he had not yet fully built, a private fortress where the world could not intrude and where the seeds of a dynasty could quietly take root. Cape Cod, with its isolation and understated charm, offered exactly that. In 1928, Kennedy purchased the first home on what would later be known as the Kennedy Compound. It was a large but unassuming shingled mansion overlooking Lewis Bay, a house designed for warm summers, breezy nights, and long stretches of uninterrupted privacy. To anyone else, it was simply a seasonal residence. To Joseph Kennedy, it was the beginning of something far greater. Here, the Kennedys found refuge from Boston society and the scrutiny that followed Joseph's growing business ventures. The home became a sanctuary, a place where the children could run along the shoreline, where Rose Kennedy could orchestrate family routines with near-military precision, and where Joseph could nurture the ambitions he carried for each of his sons. But even in these earliest years, the estate carried an undertone of intensity. The children were groomed for excellence, shaped by strict expectations, and reminded constantly that they were being prepared for something extraordinary. The mansion became the backdrop for a family being molded, tested, and pushed toward the spotlight. What began as a simple summer home was already becoming more than a house. It was evolving into the foundation of a dynasty, one that would soon captivate the nation, break barriers, and eventually endure heartbreaks that would echo across these quiet Cape Cod shores. For the Kennedys, Hyannis Port was more than a picturesque escape. It was a deliberate choice, strategic, symbolic, and deeply personal. At first glance, the seaside mansion seemed simply like a charming summer residence, but Joseph Kennedy Sr. saw something far more valuable in its wind-swept coastline and quiet streets. Distance. Distance from Boston's rigid social circles, distance from relentless scrutiny, and distance from the expectations that came with rising wealth. In the 1920s, Joseph was a man balancing ambition with secrecy. His growing influence in finance, Hollywood, and politics demanded privacy, something Cape Cod offered in abundance. Hyannis Port was accessible yet remote, close enough to the center of power, yet just far enough removed to give the illusion of normal family life. Here, the Kennedys could exist behind their own curtain, far from the eyes that followed them everywhere else. For Rose Kennedy, the choice was equally practical. She believed the summer home offered the perfect environment to raise her children with structure and discipline. The oceanfront provided open space for sailing, swimming, and football drills. The quiet roads offered room to run, play, and eventually train for the competitive and political future Joseph envisioned for his sons. The compound, even in its infancy, gave Rose the stability she wanted, and Joseph the privacy he needed. But there was also a deeper, unspoken reason. Joseph Kennedy understood that image could be as powerful as policy. A sprawling estate on the Cape projected success, unity, and tradition. It cast the Kennedys as an all-American family, wholesome, athletic, sun-kissed, and destined for greatness. The mansion wasn't just a home, it was an investment in a narrative. Hyannis Port offered a stage where the Kennedys could shape their public identity on their own terms. From this single decision, this single house, the foundation of the Camelot myth quietly began to form. As the Kennedy family grew in number, influence, and ambition, the original Hyannis Port mansion could no longer contain the world Joseph and Rose were building. What began as a single summer home gradually evolved into a sprawling family stronghold, a compound designed not just for comfort, but for purpose. Joseph Kennedy Sr. believed in expansion. in both business and family, and he approached the property with the same relentless vision. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, additional homes were purchased on the surrounding land, first for the older sons, then for the growing younger children, and eventually for visiting relatives and political allies. Each house, though distinct, was woven into a unified estate where every path, porch, and window looked inward toward the family rather than outward toward the world. The main house underwent its own transformation. Rooms were renovated, spaces expanded, and the once modest mansion became a hub of activity. Inside, Rose orchestrated the rhythm of daily life with military precision. Bedrooms were assigned by age and hierarchy. The living room, once quiet and simple, became a gathering place filled with laughter, arguments, strategy sessions, and the constant movement of children preparing for a future far beyond Cape Cod. Outside, the grounds were shaped with equal intention. Tennis courts, vast lawns, and docks for boating were added. The estate became a training ground, physically, intellectually, and emotionally. Here, the Kennedy sons learned to sail competitively. Here, family football games forged rivalries that strengthened their brotherhood. And here, Joseph quietly tested and evaluated each child's strengths, weaknesses, and potential. The expanded compound also served another purpose: control. With the homes arranged closely but privately, Joseph could maintain oversight, ensuring his children remained tethered to the values and expectations he demanded. The estate's layout mirrored the structure of the family, connected but monitored, close-knit but under pressure. By the late 1940s, the Kennedy compound was no longer just a place to escape the world. It had become the nerve center of a rising dynasty, a place where childhood blended with preparation and where the foundation was laid for the political storm that would soon reshape American history. Inside the Kennedy compound, daily life unfolded, with a rhythm that was both warm and demanding, a blend of family unity and quiet pressure that defined the household. To outsiders, the estate seemed idyllic, a place filled with children laughing on the lawn, sailboats gliding across the bay, and a famously energetic family living out a golden American summer. But behind closed doors, every day followed a structure that mirrored Joseph and Rose Kennedy's ambitions for their children. Mornings began early. Rose Kennedy believed discipline was a gift, and she enforced it with unwavering consistency. Children were expected to make their beds, attend Mass, and follow a tightly organized schedule. There were lessons, chores, readings, and physical activities, all woven into a routine meant to sharpen their minds and toughen their spirits. There was room for fun, but never room for laziness. Meals were equally structured. The family gathered together not just to eat, but to debate, challenge, and test one another. Joseph Kennedy encouraged strong opinions and quick thinking. He believed spirited conversation built leadership. At the dinner table, the children learned to defend their ideas, confront disagreements, and sharpen the qualities that would one day define them on the national stage. Afternoons belonged to sport and competition. Sailing was not simply a pastime, it was training. The Kennedy boys were expected to master the craft, understanding wind, tide, and strategy. Football games erupted on the lawn, fierce and unrelenting, each match a test of strength and determination. Even leisure became preparation for a life in the public eye, where resilience and confidence were essential. Yet in quieter moments, the house echoed with the tenderness of a large family. Children practiced piano in the living room. Rose read aloud from history books. Evenings were spent listening to radio programs or talking late into the night on the wraparound porch overlooking the water. Still, beneath the warmth and laughter ran a current of expectation. Every day, every activity, every conversation was part of a larger vision. The children were being shaped, not just to succeed, but to lead. And the mansion, with all its charm and beauty, became the silent witness to those formative years. As the Kennedy children grew, so did the weight placed upon them. What once looked like a joyful, bustling summer home slowly became a training ground where expectations hung in the air as heavily as the Atlantic fog. The world saw a glamorous, athletic family, photographed on sailboats, smiling on the lawn, embodying youth and promise. But inside the compound, the pressures that shaped the Kennedys were far more complicated. Joseph Kennedy Sr. had plans for each of his sons, plans that were mapped out long before they reached adulthood. The walls of the mansion absorbed the silent tension of ambition, the demand for excellence, the fear of failure, and the knowledge that every achievement was just another step toward a future already chosen for them. Each child, in their own way, carried that burden. For the older sons, Joe Jr., Jack, and Bobby, the pressure was relentless. Academic success, physical toughness, social poise, and political instinct were not just encouraged, they were expected. The compound became a place where decisions were rehearsed, speeches practiced, and discipline measured. Even moments of rest felt temporary, overshadowed by the weight of what the family was becoming. Rose Kennedy maintained a strict, almost ceremonial order within the home. The routines that once provided structure now reinforced the feeling that perfection was not just desired, it was required. Behind the mansion's bright white exterior, the children wrestled with insecurities, rivalries, and the constant awareness that they were being watched, evaluated, and shaped. The tragedies that struck the family during World War II heightened this pressure even further. The loss of Joe Jr. cast a long shadow across Hyannis Port, altering the dynamic inside the home. Suddenly, Jack was next in line to fulfill the dream, and the compound's lively energy carried an undercurrent of grief and expectation intertwined. By the late 1940s, the Kennedy compound was no longer just a summer retreat. It had become a crucible, a place where hope and hardship blended, where ambition demanded sacrifice, and where the seeds of future triumph and tragedy were quietly taking root. By the time the 1960s arrived, the Kennedy compound had transformed from a private family retreat into one of the most recognizable symbols of American political power. It was here, on these familiar lawns and sunlit porches, that John F. Kennedy crafted the campaign that would carry him to the presidency. The mansion's rooms, once filled with children's laughter, became strategy hubs, packed with advisors, speechwriters, and staff moving with purpose. The compound, now a hive of political energy, was suddenly in the national spotlight. But with rising power came rising stakes. Reporters gathered at the estate's gates, helicopters circled overhead, and neighbors watched as cars carrying dignitaries rolled down the narrow Cape Cod roads. Inside, the family braced against the pressure. The Kennedys had always lived with expectation, but now the entire world was watching. The once private sanctuary had become a stage. Still, the compound remained the family's anchor. It was here that Jack returned during moments of exhaustion, seeking refuge from the weight of the presidency. It was here that he sailed to clear his mind. It was here, in the quiet moments between public appearances, that he discussed the future with Bobby, leaned on the guidance of Rose, and found solace in the familiar rhythm of the ocean. Then, in November 1963, everything changed. When news of John F. Kennedy's assassination reached Hyannis Port, the mansion fell silent. The home that had witnessed decades of ambition, competition, and unity now absorbed a grief too heavy for words. Curtains were drawn, footsteps softened. The compound, once alive with movement and noise, became a place of mourning. Family members gathered in shock, holding on to one another as the weight of national tragedy pressed inward. In the months that followed, the mansion became a refuge once more, not for dreams, but for healing. The football games, the sailing races, the political gatherings, all faded. What remained was a family trying to understand a loss that reshaped their world. The compound had been the birthplace of a presidency. Now, it became the keeper of its sorrow. In the years that followed President Kennedy's assassination, the compound at Hyannis Port stood as a quiet witness to a family transformed by grief. The estate that had once echoed with ambition and optimism now carried a heavier, quieter energy. It became a place where memories lingered in every hallway, and every room seemed to hold a reminder of the life and leadership that had been taken so suddenly. The Kennedys gathered here often, seeking comfort in familiar surroundings. But the compound was no longer the bustling command center it had been during the campaign years. The laughter of children still drifted across the lawns, but even that was softened by the weight of what the family had endured. The rhythms of life continued, but they moved differently now, slower, more cautious, as if the walls themselves understood the fragility of the future. Bobby Kennedy, once the determined strategist behind his brother's presidency, felt the pull of the compound more than anyone. He spent long stretches at Hyannis Port, walking the shoreline that had shaped their childhoods. Here, he confronted both loss and expectation. The public hoped he would carry the torch forward. The family hoped he could heal. But the compound offered no easy answers, only the echo of what once was. When Bobby, too, was assassinated in 1968, the grief that swept through Hyannis Port felt unbearably familiar. Another son lost. Another chapter closed too soon. Through the 1970s and 1980s, the compound became a gathering place not only for celebration, but for remembrance. Weddings, christenings, and family reunions were held in the same spaces where grief had settled years earlier. Each event carried a sense of bittersweet endurance, a reminder that the Kennedys were still standing, even as the estate held the shadows of those they had lost. Yet the compound remained central to the family's identity. It was where they retreated from the public eye, where they confronted their private struggles, and where they preserved the legacy of those who came before them. Hyannis Port had become more than a home. It was a monument to resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. As the decades passed, the Kennedy compound shifted from a private retreat into something far more symbolic. It became a living monument, an enduring reminder of the family's triumphs, tragedies, and lasting influence on American culture. To millions, Hyannis Port represented the myth of Camelot, a place where ideals were born, where youth and ambition seemed unstoppable, and where the Kennedy name became inseparable from national identity. The estate's long, weathered porches and salt-touched shingles witnessed the evolution of 3 generations. Children who once ran across the lawns grew into adults who returned with families of their own. Political figures, activists, and world leaders continued to visit, drawn not only by the Kennedys themselves, but by what the compound had come to signify, a legacy shaped by hope, service, and sacrifice. For the family, the mansion remained a sanctuary. It was the one place where the glare of the public softened, where the burdens of fame could briefly be set aside. Inside its walls, they celebrated quiet milestones, grieved personal losses, and continued traditions that stretched back to Joseph and Rose. Sailing regattas, family football games, and Sunday gatherings carried on, each moment adding another layer to the estate's history. Yet the compound also served as a reminder of what had been lost. Portraits of Jack and Bobby hung on the walls, their presence felt in the stories told around the dinner table. The memory of Joe Jr., Kathleen, and other family members lingered in the echoes of the past. Every corner of the estate reminded the Kennedys and the nation that greatness often comes with a profound cost. Through it all, the Hyannis Port mansion stood unchanged in its purpose. It remained the heart of the family, the keeper of their shared memories, and the most enduring symbol of a dynasty woven into the fabric of American history. Today, the Kennedy compound in Hyannis Port stands as both a home and a testament. The white-shingled houses, the windswept lawns, the calm waters of the harbor, they appear timeless, almost untouched by the tragedies and triumphs that shaped them. Yet beneath the serene exterior, the estate carries the weight of a family's story, etched into every corridor, porch, and room. It is a place where history, memory, and private life coexist in delicate balance. For the Kennedys, the compound remains a sanctuary, a rare space where they can step away from the relentless glare of public scrutiny. It is where children become adults, where families gather, and where moments of quiet reflection are possible. The mansion, once a private summer retreat, now holds the echoes of decades, childhood laughter, political strategy, celebrations, heartbreak, and grief. Each stone, each board, and each window has witnessed events that shaped not only a family, but a nation. Visitors and historians often see Hyannis Port as a symbol, the idealized Camelot of Kennedy lore, but for the family, it is also intensely personal. It is the site of loss, perseverance, and continuity. The estate embodies both ambition and vulnerability, a reminder that privilege and power never shield anyone from sorrow. It holds the history of a dynasty that reshaped American politics, inspired generations, and endured tragedies that remain unparalleled in modern memory. As the sun sets over the Atlantic, the mansion reflects its dual nature, beauty and burden, joy and sorrow, aspiration and consequence. The Kennedy compound is more than a house. It is a repository of memory, a witness to lives lived under extraordinary pressure, and a symbol of resilience in the face of fate. Its story is far from static. Generations will continue to walk its halls, sail its waters, and grapple with the legacy left behind, ensuring that the dark and luminous chapters of the estate remain alive for years to come.